Jamie Pennell spent 18 years in the Special Air Service, fought terrorists, and won New Zealand's second highest bravery medal. His new book lifts the lid on elite special forces and how his biggest battle came after he left the Army. Serviceman J is a gripping memoir by a former New Zealand SAS commander on serving in Afghanistan, over 5 deployments and operating at the edge of his limits. In 2011, following the Taliban siege on Kabul's Intercontinental Hotel, an SAS soldier identified only as Serviceman J was awarded New Zealand's second highest military honor by showing outstanding gallantry in the face of danger.
Suicide vests. One detonated himself at the first security checkpoint several hundred feet from the entrance. The rest of the group then shot their way through 2 more security checkpoints and then opened fire on hotel guests. The bombers then entered the lobby and spread out throughout the hotel, shooting and detonating their explosives. Outside the hotel, Afghan police raced to help, and international helicopters hovered above. They killed 3 attackers on the roof. The siege was over.
After 22 years in the New Zealand SAS, ex-commander Jamie Pennell is now ready to tell his story. Having survived the famously tough SAS selection course and excelled during its brutal training, Jamie was sent on 5 deployments to Afghanistan and played a critical role in New Zealand's operations. From patrols across desert territories run by warlords to hostile fire and near-death combat, Serviceman J is a heart-stopping account of life inside one of the world's most elite military forces. Watch his story told on We Fight Monsters.
Great. Guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Today, I've got a great guest. This guy is going to talk about an event that was quite troubling. It happened in 2011, and that was the Intercontinental attack at the Kabul Hotel. Now, we're going to get into a lot, and I do want to talk about his childhood, what got him to go into a commando unit, and then to talk about the attack and the book. It's been a long time, 2011, so he's got a lot to say, and I've got a lot of listening to do. So just please join me, like, share, subscribe. Jamie, how are you today, man?
Yeah, I'm good. Awesome, man. Glad to be.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
So how do you know Damien, man?
Damien was part of a squadron within the regiment. So I guess for your US listeners, the New Zealand Special Air Service is a Tier 1 Special Forces unit, one of only 5 around the world, although I'm sure there'll be a few more hitting that list shortly. So there's 3 SASs in the world. It's the New Zealand SAS, the Australian SAS, and the British SAS. And then you have obviously SEAL Team 6 and Delta in the US, and those are the 5 main Tier 1 Special Forces unit. Now, we're probably not as big as your US Special Forces units in terms of numbers, but it's, you know, the numbers are in direct comparison to the local population. So your local population is 360 or 70 million in the US compared to, you know, New Zealand, which is probably hitting, I don't know, 7 or 8 million. So we do a broad spectrum of special forces capabilities, and within that we had the commando squadron, which pretty much was looking after our national level counterterrorism response. Anything beyond national level, regional and global, would be taken up by SAS badge members. So there's a difference.
But for such a small force, I mean, pound for pound, you have to be equal with what we're doing. And I think as far as the capability of a man, you know, you look at the Nazis or you look at the Germans, right? When they reduced the military, and it was so competitive, people wanted to get these billets, right? And so they really had to work hard to get in. They had to prove themselves. And I think that, you know, we've got a great military, but with these exchange programs, I mean, you've got to level up. It doesn't matter whether you have a smaller force. You've got to be good at what you do.
Yeah, 100%. And everyone's got their skill that they're good at. You know, our one's tracking down here, and we gain a lot from our lateral partners. I've been over to the US and met with SEAL Team 6 and been on some of their training. And man for man, you know, we're exactly the same. Culture, capability, you know, expertise, skill set. It's just that, you know, in the US, you got a lot more money, and, you know, you won't see a couple of C-17s parked on the airfield ready to rock and roll out anywhere in the world, you know. So, yeah.
Yeah. So let's go way back, and I'm very curious about this. So Because I think this can help us frame, our frame of reference of your mindset and dealing with this attack and how you got through it. And then as a writer, writing a book, and why did you delay it for so long? And I'm curious about that. So if you can bring me back into your youth and what growing up was like in your household. So really, did your parents support the military? And what was the reaction when you did join the military? So if you could take me all the way back to when you had that inkling in your eye to do something.
I think, I'd always wanted to join the army. I mean, we used to live down a cul-de-sac in West Auckland out here, and there's a big reserve in a bush, and we used to go in the bush, and sticks were imaginary weapons, and pine cones were grenades, and that type of thing, and we'd war against each other. And then I remember seeing a photo I had in my photo album when I was, probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old, sitting there in like a full army uniform, like camouflage uniform, in my school photo. So it was always there. I guess that sort of stuck with me, and I was thinking about it at school because I put my application in to join the army very early on. I was 17 and a half, and then I had to wait a couple of years. My entry into the army was very all of a sudden. Generally, you do all your fitness testing, and they'll slowly build you into, going on to basic training. But I got a phone call one night at about 7 o'clock, and the recruiter was on the other end of the line, and he said, "Hey, we've lost about 30 people off our basic training, and we're trying to fill the gaps immediately. So obviously you're in line. I need to know in an hour if you want to join the basic training, and if you say yes, then you're going to be down in Wairau in 2 days' time." And so I was like, and it's like, well, okay, cool. Well, call me back. So, as a young 19-year-old, I rang my mum. Mum, what do you reckon I should do? She said, well, it's up to you. It's up to you. It's a big life decision. You've always wanted to join the army, and so therefore, you can make that decision. So made the decision, went down there, and that's all she wrote. But I think when I first applied, well, I don't think I know. When I left the regiment, I had a look at my file, and my file was quite big because I'd been in the army for 20 years, and I looked at my initial application, and one of the last questions on the application was, what was your aspirations in the army? And I'd put down to join the SAS. And I didn't even remember whether I really knew, what the SAS was all about. I knew they were in West Auckland and bits and pieces. So I kind of always had that desire to go in that direction.
Now, what was youth like growing up? I mean, you were part of a gang or just reckless teens, or were you, more stable in your persona? Growing up, you played rugby. I mean, what was that like? Were you athletic at all?
Yeah. I was always physically active and that kind of thing. I did, martial arts and boxing, and played rugby and soccer. I did heaps of stuff. Raced mountain bikes. I was right into skydiving and that type of thing. But yeah, I did run with the wrong crowd there towards the end, just before I joined the army. And we're starting to get a little bit too big for our boots. And so I guess there was a point there where I could have gone either way and taken it all the way, So I could have gone the dark path or the light path. And, it was just lucky that this opportunity presented itself, as life does, take it or leave it. And I chose that path, and here I am.
So getting in, what was that like? I mean, for some people, I know when I was in the Marine Corps, I mean, it's a culture shock, right? For a lot of kids, a lot of young people. We had many people wet in the bed. We had people crying, and we had, a huge reduction in basic training. They're just gone. 137 we started with, and 55 we graduated, which is just standard Marine Corps training. But for you guys, what was that like going into the military, and when were you able to go to SAS training? So get me started from basic.
Yeah. I mean, it was a culture shock because I only really had 2 days to, register the fact that I was moving from civilian life into army life. I don't know what's better, knowing that it's coming 2 months from now, or being thrown straight in. But, they're yelling as soon as I got off the van, I'm sure it was the same in the Marines, where they're yelling at you all the time and keeping you unsettled and, telling you that once you sign the line, you're mine, that type of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, back in the day, I don't know what it was like with you, but physical punishment was still part of the curriculum, you know what I mean? Like it's classic. They lined us up in the barracks, and this big Maori guy is like, right, you guys look like a bunch of weaklings. Who's taken a punch before? And, you don't put your hand up. You know what I mean? Don't put your hand up. So some guys put your hand up. And I was just sitting there like, no, I'm not going to say, I've taken a punch, and I've taken a few punches. He just went down the line and basically just punched everyone in the stomach. And if you flinch, you got two. You know what I mean? And so he came down to me. He came down to me, comes down to me and punches me, but he didn't hit the mark, like he didn't win to me. Just pretended, that because he's a big guy, the next one was harder. So I just took it. So it was a bit of a culture shock in that respect. But you just start, and then you start sort of integrating in your little rooms. I don't know how you do it in the Marine Corps. I think you guys have got massive rooms. We have kind of 3 or 4 rooms, and you're divided into sections of 10, and that's your little crew. Okay. We had to settle into that crew, and who's where and who's what. And there's a few bullies in there, and there's a few fights and that kind of thing, but we settled things down. And the instructors are quite good too, because on a Sunday in the afternoons, they get us put on the boxing gloves and we'd, get at it, and that was part of the sort of toughening up process and that kind of thing. So, but it also helped to even us out. And you know what it's like, the different tests that they put in front of you on basic training, whether it's fitness or shooting or, or whatever. Some people are good at it than other people, and so you sort of gain that respect because you're good at stuff. You know what I mean? Either all across the board or in other areas. And so people look at each other and like, and then you start sort of settling into that group, and you always remember those guys. You know what I mean? Because you go through that period of your life. Pretty significant as a baby. You're really just a baby. In terms of the SAS. You can pretty much, once you get out of what we call core training, so you do your basic training, learn to be a soldier, then you do your core training, learn to be an infantryman or an engineer or whatever your core trade is. I went into infantry, so much like you, the Marines. And then once you've done your core training, then you can put your hand, you can start putting your papers in to do selection. And I did mine pretty early, like I was graduated into the infantry in 1995, and in 1996 I did my first selection course. However, there's rules in camp, and one of the rules was drink in the barracks. And so unfortunately, me and a couple of my mates decided to get on the piss in the barracks, which means getting on the beers, in the barracks. Had been in town, and turn the music up. We're on the top floor there, and we had the door locked, and then all of a sudden we have an orderly sergeant. I don't know what you call it. Like you have an on-call.
Yeah, we had something called fire watch.
Yeah.
Where they're standing duty and making sure you're not out of regs.
Yeah.
So
we're sitting in there, thinking we're all this and that, listening to the music. Anyway, they're banging on the door, open the door. And so we turned the radio off and then just sat silent, like as though he's just gonna walk off,
Right.
Stupid, eh? And then I said, oh, well, we'll get out we'll go out the window. We're on a 2-story building, we'll get out on the window and go down the drain pipe. Anyway, I poked my head out the window, and the other duty staff was there, and he was pointing the finger saying, open the door. Anyway, he came in, the orderly sergeant came in and said, right, you guys are all on charge for drinking in the barracks. And we knew what that meant. It was 28 days confined to barracks, which means, kind of 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. Your time is under time. You've got no relaxing. You can run. You're running to the bloody orderly hut. They'll unpack your pack. You'll have to. All your contents of your pack goes on the ground for inspection. They'll check it. If if stuff isn't clean or whatever, then they'll make you do push-ups. And then one by one, you'd have to run one piece of your full service marching order back to the barracks at a time. It takes hours. You know what I mean? And then you get it to the other end, and then you'll just do it back the other direction. And so they're just mucking you around. So that was really interesting. So that happened. The 28-day CB happened up until the like a couple of weeks before that first selection course, and I'd already put my form in to do selection. I'd been through the R tests again and that kind of thing. So they'd accepted my application. But that put a spanner in the works in terms of my build-up training for the SA selection. And yeah, so I went on there anyway, got halfway through, and then I just didn't have the strength to carry on. So a bit gutted with that. So I thought, okay, I'll sharpen up. You know, I learned a lesson actually. I learned a bit of a lesson there, and one of them was stay off the piss, keep your nose clean, and train hard. So yeah, the next year I went back, and then that's when I passed selection in 1997.
So was there a mental shift for you between the time that you were in the, I guess, the squad bay or the barracks, whatever you call it, to the time you went home and the time you went back for selection? I mean, was there a mental shift? Some people, they say, this is not for me and I'm not going back. And for others, it's like very determined.
Yeah, I mean, fear of failure can do two things to people. It can either, you know, sink them into the ground, never going to do it again, or it's going to be a platform from where you're going to spring from. So for me, I felt a bit of shame coming back, having not completed it, but having viewed it for the first time and experienced it, I knew that I could, it was achievable. And so therefore, I definitely was looking ahead to the next summer selection course the next year, which was in 1997. And yeah, did all the training. This time I was sort of front loaded, having done we call it like an assistant physical training instructor course. So you assist the physical training instructors to train the companies. So I'd done that for 6 weeks and I was super fit, like fitter than I've ever been in my life. And that sort of boded well for my success at that particular time.
Now, what was it like culturally? And what I mean is, you have a lot of young men going here in America. Let's say it's very patriotic when Ronald Reagan was in office or whomever, or there was some war and they wanted to join, and there's just a fervor. They want to get out there and they want to prove themselves. And now we're at a place in America where a lot of people are dropping out. We've degraded our forces, and there's more of a diversity push. And I'm not trying to get into the social culture war here, but I'm saying, where were you culturally in New Zealand? What was that like in New Zealand during your era? Was there a lot of patriotism? Was there a lot of desire to serve the military in your country? I know what ours was like, but what was yours like?
Yeah, patriotism for the military is not big here in New Zealand. Patriotism for our sports teams is probably more stronger, if you like. I mean, our All Blacks, you know, that's the one that hits people, which I find very strange, because I've been to the US and it really hits me, and sort of, you know, when I see you guys have got the flags out and you're right behind the military and all that kind of thing. But, you know, when things like my books come out, I suddenly see people talking about how they admire the military. So it is there, but it's not visible, if you like. So at that particular time, it was just the norm. I mean, we were running through a time between, I guess, Vietnam and when the Gulf Wars started. Do you know what I mean? And then into Afghanistan, and then obviously Iraq poked its head up as well. So there was a lot of time there where you know, we weren't really involved in any major conflicts. And I don't really think anyone else was either. So it wasn't really in the mind's eye of the public, you know, that anyone kind of was, you know, looking in the direction of the military and holding them up. We also had a government at the time. I think we had the Labor government, and the Labor government is very, you know, they know they need a military, but they won't put a lot of money into it. I don't know what you call it in relation to what you guys have got but in your parties, but they're very so we suffered a little bit, you know what I mean? We didn't have all the gear we needed in bits and pieces until, you know, things started ramping up in Afghanistan, and suddenly everyone saw that we could punch above our weight, and then, you know, the money started flowing in, and then the government's changed, and and then we are where we are, which is a pretty significant outfit, you know. So
what was your cadre like? I mean, what were the veterans that were training you, your instructors? What were they like? Were they from Gulf War vets, or, you know, how old were you at this time in your career?
So I was young.
You were being trained.
Yeah, I was 22. I had, I mean, we had guys who'd been to the Gulf War. I mean, the guys that were training us were one generation removed from the Vietnam veterans. So a lot of our stuff was orientated around the bush, Southeast Asian operations, but then it did change, obviously, when the Gulf War reared its head up. So the guys we had were hard men, strong. They had a really good work ethic. and they definitely kept us on the straight and narrow. I was a little bit, wayward. They pulled me into line pretty quick. But yeah, all the training was always hard. Lots of long walks and stuff like that, mentally difficult and physically difficult and that kind of thing. But they knew their shit and squared away. And so, you're lucky when you have those people in front of you, man, because you're trying to emulate them. If you know yourself, if you don't have some solid leaders around you, you only know what you know, and they're demonstrating what the standard is. And I think the hardest thing for any military, regardless of whether they're operational or not, is maintaining the standard. If there's a period of time where we're not at war and we're just training and everyone's getting pissed off because they're training more than they're operating, and they lower the standard, then future operators are going to suffer on the battlefield, and that's a fact. So the holding of the baton all the way through, the lifetime of a particular unit or a particular army or defence forces is very important, and essential.
And where were you politically or philosophically? And I'm asking that to compare and contrast with your mindset after Kabul, after your deployments. And I know there is a huge shift for a lot of American veterans, and some of them are saying, I wish I'd never gone, wasted my time. Yeah, I had a tribe. Yeah, I did things that were great and good, but at the same time, we don't support the military. We think it's just it's a corporate scheme, right? So, but for you, you wrote a book, you did some things, but where were you philosophically or politically? Did that change at all? And I guess we can talk about it after the book. We discussed the book.
Yeah. Not really. My stance never changed. I get it. It was sad to see the fall of Afghanistan very quickly. I think the speed at which the Taliban took over the country was surprising for most, but kind of, it's a corrupt system, so anything can happen.
Sure.
You've got to be prepared for anything. I mean, it could have gone down the track of, the people we had lost were all a waste of lives, and what we did was a waste of time and all that type of thing. But we provided, and when I say we, I'm talking about the entire coalition, provided a period of peace for the people of Afghanistan, mostly in most areas, to give them the opportunity to, educate themselves, better themselves. And then if they had sort of a brain, if they were thinking ahead and being strategic about their own futures, they would have flown out of Afghanistan and resided somewhere else, you know what I mean? If they had that kind of thought process. I think if we look back in history, it's pretty clear that you're not going to be there forever. It had to be a generational war, and it's something that's not sustainable for any nation to get into a generational war, not from a public opinion point of view, but also from an economic point of view. But my political position didn't change. I enjoyed myself. We built capability. Obviously, it helped develop our capability, made us better at what we did. We're better for the experience. Everyone knows what they're getting into when they join the military. If they don't, then they kind of need a reality check. I mean, at the end of the day, whenever I flew out of New Zealand, I'd look back and think to myself, man, am I ever going to see New Zealand again as a living person? You know what I mean? And I was happy to go over there and die for that. You know what I mean? I'm not too sure if everyone is of the same thought process, but for me, that's what I'm doing. I'm representing New Zealand. This is my job, and I know what I'm getting into. And if I die, that's part of the job.
How about deployments? Let's discuss that. And thank you for answering that question. How was your first deployment as a fresh young man, fresh young soldier going into in country? What was it like, and who did you get to work with?
So back in the day, are we talking about Afghan?
No, let's just talk about pre-deployment to either Iraq or Afghanistan, local, counterterrorism, that kind of thing. Any missions, any things you did, any operations that you were on that were quite notable before Afghanistan?
All the significant ones were in Afghan. I did the biggest, I mean, the only one I did before that was a peacekeeping operation in East Timor, which involved special forces, but we weren't really doing much. It was pretty benign, just normal run-of-the-mill patrols. It was basically just presence more than anything, and that stopped things from happening. So,
Right.
yeah, the big ones were in Afghan, and I guess the first time we went out, we got into a few stoushes out there. This was in the days where we in particular were doing what we were designed to do, which was
Mhm.
long patrols behind enemy lines. We did it by foot initially, and then we switched to doing it mobile. So we flew into Kandahar on the third rotation
Mhm.
of our commitment, and we ended up trading. I think it was, I don't know, 10 trays of beer and some bottles of whiskey for 8 Humvees. I hate Dumvees.
Yeah.
Thanks, America. And yeah, because we didn't have anything like that, we didn't have the gear
Yeah.
at that point in time. So we did some trading, and they said, yeah, sure, it's all towards the end state. And then we had to find weapon mounts. And because we didn't have weapon mounts, because we didn't have
Wow.
mobility vehicles, we're down
Yeah.
at the local dump in the back of Kandahar getting bed frames and putting them all together and test firing them down at Tarnak Farm, and yeah, it was crazy, but I mean we're effective, it's still
Yeah.
did it, still fire bullets, so yeah, it was good. So yeah, I mean initially we just went out on some shakeout patrols, got the lay of the land, and then we started getting deeper into the Badlands, and essentially we're out there to not only engage to find where the Taliban were, but also lines of communication, terrain, where the
Mhm.
trial locations were, where future forward operating bases and airfields could be located, and we're basically operating traditionally in that traditional mobility role, generally moving at night, but also moving during the day, but moving around pretty quick and finding out what was going on. We on that particular tour, I got into my first contact. So
Mhm.
so we flew in from Kandahar out to Herat, and we
Mhm.
got flown out there on Talons. I think we had 4 or 5 Talons for, I think we had 8 vehicles, 6 to 8 vehicles, can't remember. Anyway, we flew into Herat Airfield, and that was being held by some US Special Forces. I think they were Green Berets with like a partner force. Flew in, got out. They escorted us up the road. We're in the middle of the escort, and then we just switched our lights off and turned left while they continued on up to Herat, back to their forward operating base. We headed off, started heading south towards Farah, if you know
Mhm.
what that is, and we were probably, I guess, I don't know, 150k to the east of the Iranian border. And we took the next sort of 3 or 4 days to get right down south. We got picked up by the Iranians. They stood the border too, which was interesting. And as we're making our way down there, I was one of the outriders on the motorbikes. So yeah, I was the outriders basically sit ahead of the mobility patrol, and early warning and route finding, and basically just being your eyes and ears up front. We were about probably maybe half a k ahead of the convoy. We're just moving past a village, which we're trying to avoid. We just couldn't avoid it at this point in time. And we're sitting up, and we just basically sat there, turned our bikes off, and just waited for the convoy to come in. We could see them rolling in. It was
Mhm.
that we could hear a heavy machine gun open up about 800 meters out to the south, I guess I call it. Can't remember what the cardinal direction was. And I just called shots fired. And then all of a sudden, these rounds came over the top of where we were standing and exploded. And I realized they were firing at us with anti-aircraft guns.
Yeah.
So we started our bikes, called contact left, and then started making our way back to the convoy. As we're riding at speed, they increased the rate of fire and just started firing over the top of us. And they were on for line. They just couldn't get the elevation. So What we found out later is they'd mounted them up on the wall of a compound and just sort of, leaned them down, but they just weren't down far enough, because that initial volley would have knocked our asses off our bikes and killed us, basically. We were very lucky. So we made all our way back down to the convoy. By the time we got to the convoy opened up, and we started getting into an exchange of fire. We also started getting contacted by people inside the village as well. We didn't bother about that too much. We just were more intent on the heavy rate of fire we're getting from these anti-aircraft guns. There ended up being 2 of them. So we ended up stopping that. We ended up killing the guys in the compound. And then we thought we were being mortared, but what had happened was one of our weapon systems was firing low. And that, coupled with one of the boys firing an IR Siloom up on a 40mm, we actually thought they'd put an IR Siloom up, and they were, a white light, not Siloom, flare. What is it? Yeah, flare.
Yeah.
40mm, I can't remember what to call it, man. Geez, it's been so long. But it was a light, basically, the white light. And then, with the rounds going out in front of us that looked like explosions from mortars, we decided to break out of there. So we broke out of there, got to a safe area, and then took stock of the situation, and then disappeared into the night and sort of LUP'd, about 100 kilometres further to the south.
What was that? How do they see you guys? Because you guys were backlit, or was it was in the daytime, or?
Nah, there was a bit of moon out. There was a bit of moon out, not much, but it was just enough for them to see where we were.
Gotcha.
We're all, we're under NVGs. All of our light was IR and that type of thing. But it was just a series of unfortunate events. We didn't want to be anywhere near any villages, but sometimes the terrain forces you in that direction. They were firing rounds up in the air. We knew we'd been spotted, but we just decided, well, we're just going to have to keep going. To go around was unavoidable. So, very lucky to get out of that one alive. And so we moved out of the air. And anyway, the 2 main warlords for that particular area, sort of north and south of each other, found out about it. They thought it was, one warlord thought it was the other that killed his men, because they couldn't quite determine who it was. And then they kind of found out it was us, and that they're going to move forces down in our direction. But the Americans said, hey, if you go any further past this line here, then you're going to get bombed. So stay exactly where you are. But they started, so the northern warlord, I can't remember what his name is. It's been so long. But anyway, he started massing his forces on the border, so the other one did, and then they started going at it. And we just kept disappearing out to the south. It didn't really end there. We didn't realize, but we ended up getting followed up over the next 2 or 3 days. So basically tracked out. We ended up going all the way down, probably maybe 100 kilometers shy of Farah, and we sort of sat side of a mountain range, overnighted, and we looked out into the desert, and we saw these cars out there. They come in civilian cars, and they were tracking our movements, and they found out we were dismounted the vehicles and started walking up to us, and then sat in some high ground. So we sent a group of guys down, had a bit of a chit chat. They said they wanted to talk to us out in the desert there, away from where we were. We said, all right then, cool, let's do that. So we sort of split our call sign up. One was in fire support, the other one went out into the desert area. I was with the one that was out in the desert area, and there was a guy out there, and he was in some kind of he was standing in some kind of old Russian Jeep, and he had the old peak cap, and the big epaulets, and standing up on top of the Jeep, just staring at us. And I remember turning around, and I could see dust plumes starting to appear on the horizon. I said, I can see 3 dust plumes, and then that turned to 10, and then that turned to 15, and then it was, I stopped at 25. And anyway, these guys came along, and there was just, I don't know, 30 or 40 technicals with 12.7s. There was a couple of flatbed trucks with anti-aircraft guns. They had, there's about 100 men, and they all came round on the other side of where we were, dismounted, and then just sort of stood around, they sort of relaxed. And this guy with the peak hat, who was a commander, got off his vehicle, walked into the centre, and our troop commander, walked into the centre with him as well. And then he started bumping into him, saying to him, hey, what are you doing here? Not our commander, the other one. what are you doing here? You shouldn't be here. Where have you been? Like asking all these questions, and basically, a troop commander said, "Hey, listen, if you don't calm down, then a big bird will appear over above us and shit on you," meaning that, basically we're gonna, get an aircraft on station, and
Yeah.
it'll be your demise. Um, so yeah, so what happened was while they're doing that, suddenly an explosion went off to my left, and it was the fire support team coming down from where the mountain range was that hit a mine, and it was
Mm.
right on the edge of a minefield that was supposed to be about a K or so up that way, but over 20 years, obviously, it had dribbled down to where we were. So we had a guy, he lost half his leg. So we had to reorientate onto that. But as the explosion went off, I moved around to have a look, and I was like, oh man, they've hit it, they've hit something. And then I thought that was the trigger. I thought they'd put an IED on the road to trigger them to start the attack. And so when I came back around, I'd already pulled up the tension on my trigger, half expecting half of these guys that were sort of looking like they weren't doing anything to start laying down fire on us. And they just sort of as surprised as we were. And at the same time, an AC-130 Spectre gunship did a low pass, like they never do it. They never ever do it. Did a low pass over top of us.
Terrifying.
And, yeah. And then they just got on their vehicles, and he said to our troop commander that we've got bigger things to worry about now. So they got on the vehicles and just hightailed it out.
Smart move.
Yeah. And so we dealt with that. Man, it took us 2 hours to get that guy out, medevaced out, because of how far south we were.
Mhm.
So we kept him alive. He lost half his leg, went to Germany.
Sad.
That was my intro. You know what I mean? That was my intro to Afghan, and as a young fella, and there was plenty more stuff going on that we got into. But yeah, that was that particular patrol was the longest patrol that anyone had done in the coalition at that point in time. It was 4 weeks. We're out there 4 weeks, and I learned a whole lot.
It's great, man. Now, how about American servicemen? Did you get a chance to work with any of our units at all?
Yeah. We had a couple of STS guys with us throughout our time. They're really good guys to work with. We had some interpreters, so really good to work with as well. But yeah, mainly in that support function. We did meet some Special Forces guys out there every now and again, but always had good relationships with the Americans and what they've provided us, when we didn't have anything, and and who they attached to us. So we were getting into a few skirmishes. So for the STS guys, it was, they wanted to get amongst it. But yeah, it was good, man. We've got a real good relationship with the US, as we do with our other lateral partners, Canadians as well, Norwegians, Brits, Australians. It's all, we all speak the same language, same culture. So, it's really good. Different times though. I mean, those particular tours, those first 2 tours that I did doing long range patrols, mobility patrols, are in stark contrast to, moving into the city, and suddenly you're going from long range engagements to, close CQB, in confined spaces, urban.
Yeah, so that's sounds like your book. But let's talk about journaling. Did you do any of that to keep notes about? I mean, did you even know you'd be writing a book? So let me ask you about that.
No, I don't think I was ever going to write a book.
Yeah, were you doing video logs or anything like that? Or
I started journaling. Then it just tapered off because we're too busy.
Yeah.
So, we'd go out for 3-4 weeks at a time generally, and then we'd come back, and then we'd have a week of downtime, and then we'd go straight back out again. So more out than in. So I didn't really have a chance to do much of it. I did note that I did start a journal, but I never really finished it. And I kind of had to rely on my ever diminishing memory, of all the operations that I've been on, and trying to break them apart into their separate parts. But what I found was that there was a lot of mission merge. Like I was slipping I wasn't too sure if it was this tour or that tour, and doing this and that, and I kick myself now because if I'd kept a journal, it would be. Yeah, I'd have a whole lot of minute detail on particular days and things that we'd done that would be of interest. I just remembered that we did do a job with the Navy SEALs as well on that same patrol, where we had to put in a whole lot of special reconnaissance patrols across a cave system that we thought was being used to move arms and vehicles and bits and pieces. Quite a significant area. And it was going on winter, and so we were all prepared for winter, but I don't think the Navy SEALs were prepared for winter. So we went up there and got inserted, and the very next day, almost like clockwork in Afghan, the winter starts.
Yeah.
It starts just night and day. And they're up there on the hill, and I felt sorry for them because they're up quite high on the hill, and I could see them sort of like kicking around, but they hadn't brought any shelters or any of their warm gear, so they suffered for a week. We just had to laugh. Got on the helicopters and laughed, That'll suit you. The rest of us had all our winter weight gears, because we came on with big packs, and they're looking at us.
Yeah.
Like, what are you guys doing?
What is this?
Mate, it's gonna be snowing in a couple of days, So they all had small little packs like day bags. I was thinking, man, how does this track? So it was a bit of a laugh. Yeah.
So bring me up to basically the 2011 attack. What were your movements? What were you guys doing before the attack? I mean, where were you at? Where were you based out of? And let's go through that if we can.
Yeah. So
we'd love to talk about the book. Yeah.
Yeah. So 2011. We'd done three as a commitment. We'd done 3 tours up till that point, and that was full. And that was full numbers. I think we had a whole squadron in there, but the government decided that the CRU, the Crisis Response Unit, who we were training and enabling, that was our partner force that we were responsible for in Kabul, and CRU were basically charged with looking after security and responding to any spectacular attacks inside Kabul, and also doing high-risk arrests, not only in Kabul, but in the outlying areas, outlying provinces. And so that was our job, and we had a group of mentors who were solely charged to do the training, and I was with the group that was solely charged with, helping to support their training every now and again, but essentially enabling them with specialist skills. And going out on every time they deployed, we all deployed together. So the specialist skills that we gave them was, around stuff that they haven't quite built yet, like sniping and explosive method of entry and a few other bits and pieces. But so that's what we're there to do. My job was as a ground commander on that tour because we have reduced numbers. So I was I was only a sergeant, but I was made a ground commander. So I was stoked with that. And we just started getting about our business. The first 4 months of that particular tour were pretty uneventful. We did a lot of high-risk arrests, but nothing was really happening of note. And then all of a sudden this turned up. So I got woken at about 10 o'clock at night, rudely woken out of my slumber. We all like our sleep on the 28th of June, 29th of June 2011. And I got called over to the Tactical Operations Centre, or the TOC, by the senior national officer that we had there. I got into the back of the TOC and sat at the back there with the senior national officer and started getting briefed on what was going on. In front of us in the TOC, we had, as you do, a number of screens. One of them was had Fox News on it, but Fox News, it was only really good for optics. We're just seeing what was going on, really, rather than taking on board what they're talking about, because generally they don't have a really accurate picture of what's happening. And it's all just rhetoric. And then we had an ISR platform that was directly above the target building, and it was just a live feed, and we could see on the feed that the terrorists on the roof were having a gun battle with the ANP, the Afghan National Police, who are in a cordon, quite close to the building, ring fencing it off.
So let's go ahead and build this out, guys. So if you're listening, basically this was on June 28th, 2011. So what, 13, 14 years ago, right? So you had a bunch of gunmen and suicide bombers. I think there was, I said, what is it? 19, right? No,
it was 9 insurgents.
Nine gunmen. That's right.
Yep.
That's what it was.
And
they had killed at least 21 dead. And you guys didn't know that at the time. So move us ahead. What was the information you're getting in? and what were the initial thoughts going through your mind and your teammates?
Yeah, so initially we really didn't know how many numbers were on site. Like, we didn't know how many of them were running around with guns, because they were moving in and out of the rooms on top of the roof. There'd be 5, suddenly there'd be 3, then there'd be 7. Like, you couldn't really get a gauge on how many. They didn't know. We knew, yeah, like they killed anywhere between, I mean, our count was anywhere between 17 and 20 odd people have been killed in the initial attack. They didn't know how many hotel guests there were in the hotel. They knew there's 150 rooms, so we just had to say, well, okay, we've got 150 guests, and they're going to start doing bad things to them. They're going to start throwing them off the roof and whatnot. So that's what we were working with. Pretty ambiguous information. Our mentors were already down there. They'd already taken residence in the lobby. And as I said, when I was sitting with the SNO, we're just discussing all of this information. And then he just said to me, yeah, get down there, get the boys together and race down there. Now, Kabul at night, the curfew's at 10 o'clock. There's only checkpoints, so you can get down to areas like that in pretty quick order. So we went down there, parked our Land Cruisers up sort of shy of the target, because at the end of the day, we were in full, there was a piece of the road where we were still in full view of the hotel, and we didn't want to start getting engaged, so we decided to go by foot and sort of sneak around the shadows. Got up to where the incident control point was, and that's where all the commanders from all the different units that were on site were congregated, including the Minister of Interior, who basically governs the security forces there. And we got a brief from the CIU about what was happening. Made our way up to the building, and as we got up to the building, where we wanted to get into a position where we could see the entry into the hotel, basically gunfire started erupting from the top of the rooftop, between the top of the rooftop and the AMP. We weren't really worried about getting into that gun battle. We're just letting the AMPs deal with that. We needed to know how to get into the building and then stop these guys. So myself and one other, the lead assaulter, got over the berm and started looking in, and we got comms with our mentors, and they flashed a light and said, "Hey, we're over here." I said, "All right, cool." So we had to do a little bit of a hard target. I don't know what you guys call it, where you're running one at a time.
Bounding.
Yeah, just running. So not all together as a group. So you get mowed down. Only one person's going to get shot. Hopefully not. And then got into the lobby. Once we all got into the lobby, the whole hotel was pitch black. On the ground, I could see one of the terrorists. He was dead, and basically had been tipped over by one of the security guards inside the lobby. When the mentors arrived with the CRU and they started clearing the immediate area in the lobby, they started going up some stairs and they started taking fire from the security guard, but they didn't know it was a security guard at the time, so they yelled out. The CRU kept a level head and said, identify yourself. He said, "I'm a security guard." They called him forward. He had wet his pants. He'd obviously, it was a scary, situation to be in, but he did the right thing by knocking that first guy over. When we looked at him, it gave us an understanding of what we're dealing with. So still didn't know what the numbers were, but he had a suicide vest on. He had an AK-47. He had the over and under with the 40 mil underneath. He had 40 mil grenades. He had, just normal grenades, Russian grenades. He had energy drinks. He had his food, and he had a nice new pair of shoes. And they all seem to have had a nice new pair of shoes as a reward, I guess, for doing the business. So that's what we had to. That was, what we were dealing with. That and the fact that they were also using RPGs off the top of the roof as well. So. Yeah, it was, at that point, the CRU had not conducted any type of training to do with high-rise buildings. So they hadn't done 5 floors in a hotel with all the lights on and they're off and, NVGs and essentially, a hostage rescue, if you like. So they hadn't done any of that. They'd done high-risk arrests, sort of single multi-level, 2-story compounds and buildings in and around Kabul and out in the rural area. So they weren't really ready for this type of job. So with the small group that I had, we decided to take the lead. and we started making our way into the hotel. First thing we saw was off to the left in the internet room was a guy slumped against the wall. He'd been
Mhm.
the initial attack, just writing an email. I checked him, see if he still had any life in him. He's dead. Carried on around into the kitchen area, and then just by chance, we found the northern stairwell, which was advantageous to us. Didn't have any schematics. We're just working on feel.
Mhm.
And we started clearing the first floor. While we were clearing the first floor, we just decided that it was just going to take too long to be sequential and start doing floor by floor clearing. It just wasn't helping the situation. The weight of fire coming off that roof was significant enough for us to be worried about not only the A&P being shot at in the inner cordon, although they're trained for that, but basically the direction of fire was high and it was going into the neighborhoods surrounding the hotel. So obviously there's families in that inside there compounds, that are at risk of being killed as well. It's just lucky they build them so thick that can withstand bullets. But we had to get up to the roof and sort that problem out quickly. And as we know, we want to get inside the enemy's decision-making cycle in a heartbeat. That means
Yeah.
that observation, observe, orient, decision, action. And so we needed to get up to the top of that roof at speed, get them focused on us, and then start, getting into it with them and get their focus away from shooting off the roof and potentially pulling guests out of their rooms and the floors above and, throwing them off the top of the building, which is what they're talking about. So we started making our way up the northern stairwell. The lead assaulter, he on the fourth floor, he rounded the corner and came face to face with the first terrorist. They're about 1.5 meters apart. Both fired. Steve knocked the guy over on his ass, but the adrenaline was such that he got up immediately, ran straight up the top of the stairwell, got to the top, and then the ISR footage that we saw later, he dropped out onto the roof. One of his mates came over. They had a little bit of a powwow, and I think the guy that was shot said, "Hey, I'm going to detonate myself." And he would have said, "Okay, you detonate yourself." And then he walked away and around. And the moment of detonation was such that the guy that he was talking to was close enough for him to get killed as well. So he did a 2-for-1 deal. So we're happy with that. At the same time that the guy, the guy that just detonated himself, just going back, after he got shot and ran up, we started taking a high weight of fire from the top of the stairwell. So from an elevator position, from a guy up on top of us, and we started raining grenades down on us as well. The first grenade that landed by Steve's feet. And although an equal grenade started moving away towards the fourth floor, lucky the door was open, so it started moving that direction, but the grenade was almost comical, it's attached on by a string. It sort of bounced all the way into the fourth floor, detonated behind him, concussed him, through shrapnel in his back arms and legs. And and then he was sort of out of comms for a bit. And so we had we're in the process of winning the firefight in a confined space. We're getting grenades thrown down on us. I don't know how long we're in there for, and I was yelling out to Steve as well to try and get comms with him because he was on an uncleared floor as well, and we couldn't cross the space we were in. It was an open stairwell. It was a U-shaped stairwell, but it had all these open spaces, so we had to be very careful about what we did. He appeared at the door. I said, "Are you okay?" We neutralised the threat above us, and he said, "Yep." Gave him some covering fire, brought him back in, and then we moved down to the third floor and started reorientating onto a new plan. So it was at this point I brought in the squadron commanders of the squadron commander of the CIU squadrons that we had, and they basically held the stairwell so no one could travel up and down the stairwell on the northern side. And then started clearing the rooms on the third floor and started pushing guests down into the kitchen where they were going to be secured. I took a small team of SAS guys who went across to the southern stairwell, did a covert clearance to the top of the southern stairwell, got to the top and realised there was a steel bar across the door of the entry to the top. So we chucked an explosive charge on there, went down one flight to get out of the way of the charge backblast. And although that wasn't really going to help, and then called for some more support from the CIU. but we only got 2 guys. The rest of them were occupied with clearing rooms. So, yeah, at this point, we still didn't know how many people were on the rooftop. While we're having that little gun battle in the stairwell, we had a helo sniping platform that was circling the building. Lucky there was no moon up. I couldn't really see it, but as we were making our way up the stairwell, I could hear the rounds going off the roof towards the helicopter and then coming back down in the other direction. So they ended up knocking a few guys over on the roof. But because of the rate of fire that was coming off the roof, I was not surprised. I could see out at the they had these little slit windows in the northern stairwell fire stairs. I was not going to be surprised to see a Black Hawk spinning out of control and crashing into the car park. I thought I was going to see some kind of Black Hawk down scenario going downrange, because it was pretty significant. So we were positioned in the southern stairwell. I called back to my headquarters and said, "Hey, we're in position, ready to get up on the roof." He said, "Yep, cool. I'm going to tell the helo sniping platform to go on a wider arc." Said, "No worries." And then we just waited there, and we put fresh magazines on our weapons, and it was at that point I was sort of thinking, for some reason, I'm not too sure, it's just one of those things that came into my head, but I saw the flash of the New Zealand flag, and in my mind I thought, man, this must be what it was like in World War One, when they're going over the top, and it was the same sort of thing. So we only had a small group. There was 6 of us, I think, and we're going against an unknown sort of enemy number. But
and you're ascending as well, aren't you? Right?
Yeah, and we're going. We're on an elevated enemy as well, and that's not always great. But it's always the way with special forces and people who are highly trained. You become, it's combat multipliers. That language. You got the skills, the technique skills and experience and weapon systems to overmatch the enemy in terms of ratios and numbers. So gave the boys a bit of a battle brief. There's a lot of swearing and stuff like that, and then I just said, "I'll see you on the other side," and gave them the standby go, blew the charge, blew the door off its hinges, threw a couple of grenades out to clear space, and then got out into an extended line and started making our way from south to north across the rooftop. There's a guy sitting lying underneath one of the satellite dishes. He was engaged. I could see a leg sticking out from behind one of these satellite dishes. They had a whole of these satellite dishes that were on elevated concrete slabs. And then beyond that, on the northern end, they had the big shed which housed the elevator mechanism for the elevators inside the hotel. So that's kind of what we're looking at in front of us. So there's these little areas where they could get a little bit of cover. So when I was shooting at the leg and then coming up and around it, I thought I was doing the right thing. But then when I got around, it was a leg, because of they'd been detonating themselves. A couple of guys already detonated themselves, and so there's heads, arms, legs, meat. A lot of stuff was all over the roof. On the left side, we kept clearing. I was on a pier on the right side. On the left side, we had another pier. They started to get into a gun battle with the last insurgent behind the elevator mechanism room. But he had the same idea we did. We were coming around to try and cut him off from behind while he's still engaging with our guys on the left. But he must have come around and had a look, saw us coming, and then basically knew his time was up. And as we started coming around, he just detonated himself. Wow. It's always the way. We'd notice that, you put pressure on them, they'll collect themselves off, and they'll try and take you out in the process, as well as themselves to martyr themselves. So he felt the pressure, collect themselves off, rather than, get into a last minute sort of OK Corral gun battle with the group. So got to the edge of the northern end of that rooftop. Made sure that the guy that was on top of the stairwell there that engaged us earlier was taken care of and neutralized. And then I got word on the radio immediately that there was a fire that had been set below us in the 5th floor function room. We didn't know what that was. We didn't know who had lit it, but there was another terrorist that was down on the 5th floor waiting for us. So I called a hasty evacuation, which meant that we were going to get all the guests out of the room as quickly as possible and head them down to the kitchen and hold them there. Obviously, that was happening already, but we needed to be a lot more quicker about it because I didn't know where that fire was going to go. Went down, punched the fire alarm system, didn't work, did that a couple of times. Obviously, the director of health and safety for the Intercontinental Kabul Hotel needs to be fired. Wasn't doing his job. Yeah, no sprinklers or anything like that. And so we started clearing out those rooms down to the kitchen. We tried to make entry onto the 5th floor, but there's just too much smoke. We couldn't get in there. While that was happening, the terrorist that was on the 5th floor that caused the fire, he was actually talking back to his handlers in Pakistan, and basically is saying how he's just comfortable on the bed at the moment, and he's just waiting for us to arrive. We didn't know about that until later on, but yeah, that came up on Al Jazeera. That was an interesting video to watch. Anyway, got all the guests down to the kitchen. Obviously, we searched and all that sort of thing. And I just said, "Hey, listen, you're under control of ISAF SOF, and to stay here until we tell you to move because we still don't know if you're safe to get out of the building." Do you want me to carry on? It's a long story.
Oh, please, absolutely. This is completely fascinating. And there's not much information. If you do any searches, I mean, you do know that, there's a predator getting surveillance. But I'd love to hear a play-by-play of what you guys were able to observe with the videos, if you got any of that, if you're able to see, the battle that was on the roof. But please, absolutely. This is fascinating.
Yeah. So, we got everyone down there. And then I just said, okay, well, let's, while we're happy that we'd cleared the floors 4 to 1. We're happy with that, but just the 5th floor was remaining. We had a couple of, I think we had like 3 or 4 Afghan firemen, complete with AK-47s, which you never see, running up the stairwell with their hoses to put out the 5th floor fire. So while they're doing that, we went all the way to the top, did a battle damage assessment, cleared the suicide vests on some of the guys that we saw that were still intact, and basically had a conversation back to headquarters about where we're at and what we're doing. We were standing on the rooftop, just chin wagging until the fire was put out, and by this time a lot of the Afghan forces had come into the hotel, so there was a lot of movement. A lot of people were running around the floors and bits and pieces, so there's quite a few security forces here. It was all well and good and controlled right until the CIU left and they didn't tell us. So we're up on the roof and they decided to leave, go back to Camp Olympus. All they were doing was reorganizing just in case there was another attack in the city. But once that comms link was gone, then the chaos started. So we were up on the roof. The firemen were putting out the fire in the 5th floor function room. Once it was kind of partially out, that guy, the last remaining terrorist, came down the corridor and started shooting in a cordon. So we heard a weight of fire go out, and then basically the inner cordon must have been maybe, I don't know, smoking and having a cup of tea, and then they turned around, saw where the fire was coming from, saw our heads, and then just started lighting us up. So they lit us up while we were on the roof, so we all took cover. But we didn't know that was happening. All we heard gunfire, and then we heard we started taking rounds, and it was still on an angle, but it was still cracking, so we're trying to fight. It was like, oh, okay, where's that coming from? And I actually thought we were going into phase 2 of their operation, which was getting contacted from the hills. I actually thought they had this planned, I thought, and I thought to myself, oh, well played, eh? They had us up on the roof, they're going to get a few, they're going to get us off. But then it was apparent that as the fire kept going, I was thinking, oh, it's not actually pinging off. It's coming from another direction. Then we realized, it's coming down from the inner cordon. So we sort of poked our heads out, waved our hands, and they went, oh, yeah. And then they cut their fire. So I said, oh, okay, all right, where's the CIU? Oh, they're gone. All right, it's us now. Let's go down there and sort this out. So we went back down, got down to where the 5th floor function room was. It was completely gutted out. Sort of, half put out bits and pieces, and out of the smoke comes 3 of these, I don't know, there might have been Russian pilots. They're in their whites, their nice white uniform, peak caps, with their trailer bags, walking over the rubble, going obviously out to Kabul International Airport to fly their aeroplane out into wherever they were flying out to. And I just found that odd. I just found it really odd.
That is an odd sight, man. If you think about it,
Just clean,
yeah,
just
yeah.
and they had no real, they weren't like, oh, thank you for saving us. They're just like, hey, like they're just normal day,
That's the theater of the absurd right there. So
Oh, it's weird, yeah.
yeah.
So the only way we could get round to where we wanted to go, where the fifth floor corridor was, because of the destruction that was inside the fifth floor function room, was they had like a little balcony. So it went past the elevators, back of the elevators, and it sort of went down on the western side as a balcony. Anyway, on this balcony there was like some air conditioning ducting, which will make sense later on. And then we could see some expended AK-47 cartridges sitting on the by the door into the fifth floor corridor. And we're like, okay, he's gone in there. So we thought, should we throw a grenade or should we throw in a flashbang? So we decided to throw in a flashbang just in case, there was someone sitting in there. There was, some more people walking down the corridor. Threw the flashbang in and it just went boom, 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 boom. And then all of a sudden, the Intercontinental starts shooting on us again. So I didn't take notice of where we're standing, what we're up against or anything, but we all just ducked down behind this the railing of side of the balcony, and we're lucky enough to be up against like probably about that, I don't know, maybe a couple of inches thick of concrete, maybe not even that, had reinforcing, because we basically and it would have been about maybe half a meter wide, so we're just crunched up, heads up, hard up against these panels, these concrete panels, and we're just taking fire. And again, from the Intercontinental, and again, I don't know how long we're there for, but I was looking up on the wall, just watching the rounds ricochet off the wall in front of us. And I was hoping I wasn't going to see big chunks from a 12.7, mounted machine gun going at us, because those panels weren't going to last long, and they were laying it down, laying it down good. And I was thinking, here we go. So I turned around and there was an Afghan policeman that was sort of poking his head round the corner at us, and I was yelling at him to stop them firing, but he just wasn't listening. So I got on my radio and was telling our guys who were up on the roof to get the interpreter, get them to stop firing. So they eventually stopped. And I said, is everyone okay? And they went, yep. And then one guy said, I think I've been shot through the side of the head. So I got him to turn around, and he was in front of me, and he'd basically taken round. It must have ricocheted off the wall and had gone in and out, like behind his ear, and sort of his ear was was pissing out with blood. It was the same leader soldier had taken the shrapnel down on the fourth floor, And I looked him in the eyes, and this sort of comes back to our tenets of human humility. And I said, "Have you had enough yet?" And then we started laughing, And we just
This is Steve, right?
This is Steve, yeah, Steve.
Yeah, right.
I said, "Man," I just said, I think you've had enough. You've had enough now, eh? And he goes, yeah. He didn't say yes, because he'll never say yes. So I said, we're going to have to get you off to hospital, man. This is just after us getting an entire team wiped off the face of the planet. You can imagine if they were just wooden panels. We're gone. That whole team been gone, So, I still don't know how we got out of that. That was crazy. And so I said, all right, it's getting a little bit too chaotic. The CRU aren't here. I have no comms link to coordinate what we're doing. Let's just leave it to them. They can figure out that last guy. They've got enough people here anyway. So we made our way down to the lobby. I did a handover to the local Afghan National Police commander who was in the lobby. Told him what we'd seen and done. I said, there's one more guy. You're going to have to sort that out. Started making our way back out into the city to drop Steve off to the French hospital in Kaya. And the CRU started driving past us again, back to the hotel. And so I called back and I said, what's the CRU doing? They said, well, they're going back to the hotel to sort out that last guy. And I said, all right, then we're going to have to go back. So I went back with the rest of the team and basically just said to the CRU, hey, listen, we're going to do it sequentially, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll wait down here and you guys tell me when we're clear and good to go. So left them to it. Heard a big explosion upstairs. Guy came running down. CRU guy had a big chunk taken out of his arm. Basically, what the guys had done on going up to the fifth floor is they'd gone along the same balcony we did. They over top of that air conditioning ducting that I talked about, and inside that air conditioning ducting, they'd rigged up a real rudimentary IED. It was just a grenade on a tripwire, basically. So they tripped it, it exploded, and took that guy out. So we went back up to see what was going on. Did a drag on the air conditioning ducting just in case there was any other IEDs that we needed to clear with our EOD enablers. And then while we're there, we decided we'll just push on, go onto the 5th floor, and then start manually moving through, clearing the rooms. Now, we weren't set up for that type of operation. We can do it, but you got to be set up for it, with the tools and the explosives and, having the explosives to do the job. So we had to do manual entry into these rooms, and it took, we got halfway down the corridor and people were starting to get pretty tired pretty quick. But we got down to room 524 and basically we started making entry into that room. I was standing on a right angle, so I was covering the corridor. I had my entry team going in. As soon as they cracked the door, bam, everything went up. Like everything went up in smoke. And I just sat there, and that's when things started to go in slow motion for me. I've never had this before in my life. Everything started slowing down, and the dust sort of slowly started building up in the room. I could see the CRU sort of crawling their way out of the smoke towards me, and with their faces of shock and disbelief, and I was sort of pulling them past me. And then, it took quite a while, and then the dust sort of cleared, and I could hear man down, and I could see the guy who was in front of the door, one of our guys who was in front of the door, slumped up against the wall. And it's like in the Marines, I'm sure it's the same. You always, whenever you do evacuation drills, they always make sure it's the heaviest guy. It's the guy that's like 100 plus kegs, tripping plus gear, just to make sure that you can do it if you need to do it, big guys. So this was this guy, and I was thinking to myself, oh man, here we go. So I grabbed him, picked him up, pulled him into the next room, and I said, are you all right? And he was going into shock. So I ran him out, back down the corridor, and put him on a seat, and he was going into severe shock, like he'd take the front blast of it. But because he's such a big guy, if with anyone else, they probably wouldn't have made it. But he's such a big guy, he just took it like a champion. But he had quite a few ball bearings in him and bits and pieces, and he was going into shock. So we sort of yelled at him in his ears to stay awake, and then we just moved him out to the hospital. I went back in, left the medic to deal with him, went back down the corridor, and I said, is everyone else all right? And he said, there's a couple other CRU guys that need medical attention. So we started ferrying them out down the corridor. And I said, what was that? Was it an IED, or was it one of these terrorists wearing a suicide vest? He said, one of my guys said, I think it's one of the suicide attacker. I said, how do you know that? And he said, because his head's laying in the doorway. And I could see it was right there, they pop off. So it's doorway, and I looked into the room. The room was gone burgers. It was just was smashed to bits. The water was pissing out of all the faucets because all the pipes were, ruptured and that kind of thing. So it was at that point that I knew we'd done our dash. I mean, we were 2 down. I wasn't too sure if they were coming back into the mix. We already had a small team, and I was thinking about how long it would take us to get us back up to full numbers back in New Zealand, travel time and whatnot, because we still needed to operate. I mean, we had a job lined up in the next 3 days that we needed all our guys on for. So, we could have kept going, potentially lost another person. It just seemed like we were, moving towards someone getting killed, like it was just, we're getting closer and closer to someone getting killed. And, not taking into the fact that, we've been shot at from not only the terrorists, but, the AMP as well. So it was just we're in a bit of dire straits. So I made the command decision to get down, leave them to clear the rest of the hotel. That was the last guy anyway, in retrospect. And then, he headed out to the hospital, made sure the guys were right. One of our guys, the guy that took the full brunt of the blast on the 5th floor, he ended up flying out to Germany. He's all right now. He ended up having one of the ball bearings ricocheted off his collarbone and went into his lung. So started tensioning on the way to the hospital, so he's very lucky. So he went to Germany. Steve stayed on. and got into another job, not too long after that. But yeah, it was 10 hours. 10 hours felt like a heartbeat. Um, yeah, very significant operation, but it didn't really register to me for a long time. I was just pretty blasé about it. I was like, yeah, okay, maybe, but I was just focusing on the next task, basically, as you do. So yeah, that was it. Went back, got a bit of lunch, crashed out, and then did a bit of a debrief with the SNO at about 6 o'clock.
Fantastic story, guys. If you look at online, you're not going to find out a lot about it. So you're hearing, from the horse's mouth right here. But quite a lot of people dead. Amazing job by Jamie and his team. Fantastic. And you can look online and what terrorist groups were out there. Haqqani Network, a bunch of other terrorist groups. Working in Pakistan. Fantastic story. And again, the book is Survivor J. Great book. So 2011, when did you separate from the service? And tell me about that. What was that? Was it slower pace for you? I mean, this is a substantial story. Substantial story. And then when did you separate?
So I came back in 2011. When did we get back? Maybe mid to the end of 2011. Mm-hmm. And then I decided to take a sabbatical because my partner at the time was a servicewoman, and she had an opportunity to go to Israel and be a UN military observer and take her partner across. And I decided that I'd just take a break, do some studies while she was operating, and then figure out what my plan was past that point. Coming to the end, unfortunately, if you do service paid study, I was doing a degree at the time, then it was a 2-year return of service after you'd done your degree. So they get they get their money's worth from your education after you get out, after you get back, sorry. And so, I had a good time over in Israel, and that was sort of kind of a decompression, but you're always in the combat mindset. You always I'd get up in the morning, train hard, I'd be into the study, that type of thing. And yeah, and I just kept going on with that pattern of life. So I didn't really, give myself the opportunity to decompress, you know what I mean, and chill out. I was just sticking in the routine, which was a shame. I should have taken that opportunity. So I went back, got back into the flow of things, thought I was thinking about leaving, and then it kind of didn't happen, and then I stayed on for a few more years. I ended up being shoulder tapped to become an officer. I was an OR. I was going to be a sort of moving into the realms of being a warrant officer, like a squadron sergeant major. And I had the opportunity to either do that or become an officer and become a troop commander and command troops. So I decided to be a troop commander. I wasn't ready to put my feet under a desk right there and then. So I saw the opportunity to stay out there with the lads, and then my son was born, and that kind of was the tipping point of me getting out. That was in 2016. That, and the fact that I was completely burnt out, and I just started recognizing it. I mean, I had ulcers in my retinas. I had long-term memory loss. You know what I mean? You don't think you can ever get that, but you do. I had to carry a notebook with me everywhere I went to remember stuff. I found I was like just very lazy in the way I was moving. I was hunched over, like all these physical, physiological effects of stress and burnout over a long period of time that obviously catch up on you incrementally. They happen so in such a small way that you never notice it creeping up on you until it's too late. It's like a heavy weight on your shoulders, which I'm sure you know yourself. So yeah, 2016, it was time to move on. Got out, and radio silence.
What was your support mechanism? Family, friends, girlfriend type thing. I mean, what did you have around you? And were you realizing that you had maybe some type of trauma that you weren't handling, that you weren't dealing with?
Yeah. So the NZDF has got a bunch of psychologists that do a job. We had our own psychologist for the the SAS, but the support is there. It could be better, but you're kind of, you're only really talking to the brothers. You're only really talking to your brotherhood or the people that are there.
Right.
So you kind of got to meet them halfway. If you want to be doing that stuff. So that the support is there, but do you really take it? Not really. Guys won't do it. They don't want to appear weak. They don't want to potentially compromise their career options. All perceived. This is all perceived assumption.
Right.
What's going to happen? It's not the reality. Well, who knows? Maybe it could be, but that's what was happening. But for me, I didn't really think I really needed it. I wasn't recognizing stuff at that particular point in time. I only had a real, minor, real small understanding of how I was thinking and feeling about things, and it wasn't until I had to transition out further and further once I was out of the regiment and started creating distance and started seeing it in the rear vision mirror did I start really taking stock of the particular character traits that were, useful on the battlefield but weren't useful in real life.
So I want to make a correction. It's not Survivor J, it's Serviceman J, but I'm saying you're a victim in any way. I think your story is very fascinating. Was there displacement for you? I mean, we talk about brotherhoods and teams, etc. Of course, you're serving with these people, and you're thick as thieves, doing amazing work. And then again, there's a separation, right? It's just because you're out and some guys are still in. How'd you fill your time? How'd you fill your space? Were you doing artwork? Were you painting? Were you writing anything at this time? What was your outlet for expression?
Yeah, I was doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at the time, so that was keeping in that combat mode. I was thinking about, getting a pistol and a rifle and going to a gun club so I can continue shooting, but I decided against that. I decided that I was just going to start renovating the house. We'd bought a new house and needed a bit of work, so I started committing to that. And I was also committing to master's studies as well, so that was going to take a good chunk of my time. But that was how I was going to fill the gap. But, it was more of a distraction. What I needed to do was deep cognitive work, and that's what I found out. And once I read the book, while I was sort of studying and starting to read more about how the brain works, I read that book from Dr. Joe Dispenza called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. Have you read that book? Yeah.
I have not, but I'm going to have to look that up.
Yeah, that's a good book. It's that'll really put you in the picture about how to change your character traits. If you talk to, research suggests, I'm not too sure, I'm guessing it's the same now, but they say that by the time you're 35, that your character traits are pretty much set in concrete for your
Right.
Yeah, and obviously you got foundation building when you're in your younger years, but 35 is where it's pretty much embedded. So, at 35, I was still operating. So my character traits are all battlefield survival traits, and there's a lot in that. You've got to strip that all the way back and figure out what's useful and what's not. Obviously, being highly organized and strategic and those kinds of things bode well out here. But, you got to, I think it's more the interactions with people and staying calm and patient, in the new culture. Those are real hard things to do for a soldier when you're, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
I tell you to do a thing, you do a thing. Out here in the civilian world, you can't do that.
It's very different.
It's discussions and collaboration, team. Get over it. And they're not. And the other one is high expectations of yourselves and others. You can have a high expectation of yourself, but don't be too self-critical, because that's detrimental to your mental health as well. And high expectation of others, like expecting people to be at your level, and if they don't get up there, then they're not. They're not worth anything. Those types of things were just, it just takes a while. I was doing simple things like the meditation stuff was really helping me. Box breathing, started with box breathing, which is really, obviously, bringing your sympathetic system and down to into the changing systems, sympathetic to parasympathetic. But it's more the refocus, learning how to refocus, and that's the real skill, right? Focusing is one thing, refocusing is the other. It's the thoughts that come into your head and whether or not you're going to retain or discard them, and staying in the present moment and engaging with others. Because that was one thing, that was another thing that was that I found that I dragged over, is that on-call mentality. So you always, you're on call. We had a pager that we set on our hip, and if the pager went off, then obviously we rang in and all that. It would go off every morning as a test to make sure that the pager worked. And so your mind's always distracted. You know what I mean? My gear's on the rack. I'm sorted. What did I do last week? What am I about to do? You might be going away on a big trip. You're not really in the present moment, enjoying the present moment. So if you've got a family, you're not really 100% here.
Right.
I mean, that's the thing. You're not here enjoying, fully engaged with your family. You're still, your brain's sort of like that. So that single point refocus training through simple things like, box breathing and meditation, and visualization is one of them as well, of course, brings you back to taking control over where your mind's going and what it should be thinking about and doing at that particular point in time. So all these things were necessary in terms of transitioning successfully away. And I guess the other thing that I did was I deliberately chose not to choose a secondary career path that had any relation to the military. So a lot of the guys would go from the military and they'd straight away go to private contracting in Iraq, Afghanistan.
That's right. Very common.
Yeah. It's normal, right? Because it's a lateral skill. You can make a lot of money, and it keeps you in that mindset. So I was fortunate enough past the point of finishing my master's studies that I had a friend who was working in high performance sport here in New Zealand. So I got an opportunity to work with our national rugby league team.
Nice.
And so I went in there and did help them with leadership development and culture. And that was the beginning of me facing away from the military and starting to turn in the new direction. And so I deliberately made myself not look back and just kept moving forward. And
fantastic.
Yeah, and just getting into places that were completely, night and day different from where I'd been. So that was really useful. And then I went from that to a national level rugby league team, which is in a league through Australia called the National Rugby League. And did that, and then I worked with Olympic athletes and other rugby teams, and just went on and corporates and stuff like that. And then that went from that to working at a school here. So I'm the head of Mangatawhiri campus for Dilworth School. So we deliver a pretty significant learning in the outdoors program from year 7, which is about 10 years old, to year 13, which is about 16, 17-year-old boys.
So important.
Yeah. And it's amazing. And this particular part of my life has been significant because the way you approach the development of boys at the different age groups is completely different. That's it. Again, that's forced me to be a different human being altogether. So it's every, you call it the hand of God, call it whatever you want, the force, whatever you call it, but it's kind of felt like I've been getting pushed in that direction. Obviously, you got to step into that opportunity, right? And so that's kind of what I've done. The opportunity came. I said yes, and I've just been saying yes all the way through, and here I am. And I'm night and day different from Jamie Pennell, 2016, stepping out of the gates to what I am now, of course. But then I've made it that way. I've made it my purpose to not be that person anymore. Whereas I guess a lot of veterans, they're trying to hold on to that identity, whereas I'm kind of de-radicalizing myself.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a de-radicalization process. Getting away from that culture, seeing what fits, what doesn't, pulling away all the good skills, leaving all the bad skills. They can stay over there, and it's a constant process. You know what I mean? It's never going to be 100%, but I can. At this point in my life now, I can track how I'm thinking and feeling emotionally in the background. I can always do that. That's just a normal thing now. Whereas, at the start, it was very, very difficult. So you got to put the effort into that cognitive development to be able to do that awareness, the self-awareness, and what's happening around you and how you're engaging with others is obviously a big one. and just move away from things that have any resemblance to the military if you need to. Some people are good with it and they're good human beings and they can handle it, but if it's pulling you down, then we need to make an assessment about what we're doing and how we're doing it.
I certainly agree. I say, all the time, don't live by your title, but live by your being. And for some people, they have a fear that they're losing a sense of themselves, everything that made them who they were, but they never look at the future of what they could be and what they can become. So it's a fascinating. There's an overlay, right? It's an overlap of the past and the future and the present, and yet they're always stuck in that present, thinking about the past and never the future. Yeah. And so they get stuck. But for you, what was your driving force? Are you a person of faith, or what is something that drove you? Because you had great success. Clearly, you're driven as a young man. I was talking to John Daly. He stood up the original Marine Raiders Detachment 1. And as a young man, the opening of his book, he says, I remember the first man I killed. And then 30 years later, he's reflecting as an old man. He said, I would never actually take advice from my old self if I was a young man. But he's trying to put it all together in a 30-year career. And for you, what's your takeaway, from what you believe, either religiously or philosophically, what drives you, the events you had? What's the main takeaway that you would tell someone, what the meaning of life is, or the value of life, or what people should be doing?
That's a big question.
Sure. So let me try to make it smaller, which is what is the most important thing in your life to you? Some people are always chasing the next experience. For you, what is it? Is it to love others, to be kind? Is it to make money, to have more fame? What is it that drives you right
now? Probably peace, I think.
Peace.
Just peace, and just being a good human being, really, and not. It's just peace, gaining control over who I am, and because when you do that, when you do gain control over the way you think and feel and how you engage with others and your self-awareness, that's where the peace comes from, because you get to a point where you choose what you want to take on or not. You know what I mean? Like, you have full control. That's my end state. That's my drive, is to be that person. And I'm still working on it, is to make sure that no one can lead me down the garden path at any point in time, in terms of, they're poking the stick at me, or they want me to be as angry as they are. Like, I don't entertain
right.
And it's what I get what I will connect emotionally with, what I want to, not what you want, not how you want me to be. You know what I mean? It's that total control, because that's the biggest thing. If you can control your emotional state, and the way you think and feel about things, your state of being, that's the ultimate goal. That's peace.
Yeah.
Choose.
I think that's very true.
Yeah.
And I think it's because you've done a lot of damage to people, right? And then there's the damage you have to look at, and you do that battle assessment. You check, head, body, spirit, heart, soul. Is it all intact? Am I there? So do you feel that you're closer to where you were a year ago, or 10 years ago, to that end state?
Yeah, I think I'm closer to what I was a year ago. I've definitely come some bounds. Every day that I'm down with the boys, instructing and leading and that type of thing, and being out in the bush and out in the water and stuff with them is very refreshing and helping me in more ways than one. It's kind of that reverse mentoring, without them knowing, type of position. So I'm very, very lucky, and I'm kind of I'm not too sure what's after this, because I can only do this job for so long before something else will turn up. But it'll be, I'm looking forward to that as well. So
I think you put the same drive that you had the first time, as a young 19-year-old, be driven and put something, into your future goal. That'd be quite good. But if you had the power to change one thing, what would it be? Would you any regrets? Didn't regret Rion, anything?
I'd do it all again. I'd do it all again. Because if I didn't do it again, I wouldn't have learnt those lessons, and I wouldn't be as better off as I am now. I'd probably be running with my emotions. You know what I mean? Just that's my
Yeah.
fate. I'll run with my emotions. That's me. I feel this way. I'll express it. I'll express that way. Like this kind of thing. This is just me. There's nothing else. There's no questioning. So that whole process has been brutal. But it's forced me to be the person I am at the moment. But it doesn't come without effort. Don't expect it just to happen. It's about a huge amount of effort over a long period of time, but you will change, and all of a sudden your body, amazing thing, you know what I mean? Neural pathway redirection and all that kind of thing is real. Pruning away your old pathways and growing new ones is real.
Mhm.
It's you can do it. It just depends how long it takes. You just got to be on that. You got to be doing it. You want to get big muscles?
Yeah.
Doing biceps.
You got
You know what I mean? You want to get
Right.
big biceps. You're not going to get bicep curls just sitting there and hoping for the best. So you got to train every day, and that's what it takes. And then all of a sudden, things start manifesting themselves, and then you're like, wow, like it is actually working. But you got to put in that mental effort, and it's got to be continuous every single day, and then it becomes a hell of a lot easier. Because why? Because we're creating a habit, and then habits form, and it just becomes part of who you are. So yeah, it's been amazing, transformational. I'm not a monk or anything like that, but all of that stuff, all that low hanging fruit, stuff that helps you out in that space
Mhm.
is just gold. But had you asked that to me, presented that to me 20 years ago, about
Yeah.
meditative breathing being something that you really need to get yourself into, I'd probably say, nah, I'm not a monk. I'm not a yogi.
Yeah.
I'm not a yogi. What are you talking about breathing? And so,
Well, you've got this book, so let me ask you: why did you write the book? Because some people, it's because there's a story to tell, and they want to preserve history, and for some, they want to make money, and there could be, a plethora of reasons for it. It's a wonderful story to tell. It should be told. People need to know. And then for some, it's I wouldn't say an exorcism, but it's something to get out. It's to clear the air, get it done, and move on. So for you, this book, I'm going to put the link down. But for you, what was your goal for the book?
basically, that the story of my experience was one part of it. That was kind of the top layer, and then
Mhm.
it's understanding the toll that it takes on your body, the effect you have on people that you love, and then the alignment, people aligning themselves to that particular journey. It may be different. I know this is a little bit high end. Some people may
Mhm.
have similar experiences at that high end, but essentially it's that journey through a high performing environment. It could be through life, you know what I mean? And what actually it gives you and what it can take away and how you can affect others. And so with that alignment, with your own journey, that'll help you understand better potentially, how you have thought and felt about things and how
Mhm.
things actually manifested themselves. And funnily enough, that's starting to come through on the feedback from a lot of my mates who have been in significant experiences in Iraq as private contractors, running those convoys, guys that I operated with in the infantry and that kind of thing. And so they really associate themselves with my journey and have decided that they need to start applying some of the stuff that I'm doing as well. But again, it comes down to them. I can't help them anymore. Like I'm not the puppet master. I can't move your arms and your legs. You still got
Yeah.
to do the work. But that's the end state for the book. And it's not always aimed at military people. Having worked in high performance sports, the high performance sports world is similar, but significantly different from what a military looks like. But it kind of has a loose sort of uh, similarities, as in they have a uniform, they have a training program. You know what I mean? They do contact sports. I'm dealing with rugby league guys. They're doing physical contact, that type of thing. But they have the same kind of issues leaving that high performing environment as well. You know what I mean? Because it's all encompassing. It's a lot of big experiences. They're in the media and all that kind of thing. So it is pretty significant. And then suddenly they're out and now they've got to re-identify who they are as well. So it's a similar track.
Jamie, did we run out of time? I'm not sure. I'm looking at the clock, and I don't normally use Zoom.
No, we're going. We're still going.
Oh, we're going, man. Yeah, great.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you. So, with all this, how's your view on love and relationships? Has it developed? Love for your partner, love for your friends, your teammates. Do you have a better understanding of that now, as an older person, and as a younger man, where it was lust? It was this romantic eros thing from Hollywood. I mean, where you at now with that?
Yeah, I think so. We've come a long way. My wife and I. My wife has been through some pretty significant critical incidents as well. Her work. And so we've both been through the ringer a little bit, sort of beating each other up, not physically, just verbally over the years. It's come to a point where, it's like death from 1,000 cuts. We're kind of just sitting there too tired to even go down that track, and we're kind of reconnecting again and just
great.
Yeah, but it's been a dark many years. But again, those things are necessary. It's just whether or not you're willing to play the long game. And a lot of guys, they lose people along the way. Like, you really got to do some soul searching, man. It's because where do you want to end up? You know what I mean? Do you want to end up as an old man, no one's supporting you because you're not willing to change yourself? I mean, it's pretty selfish, and that type of thing. So I've been lucky that she's stood by me throughout this whole process, and that we've got to this point relatively unscathed.
Quite good. Yeah, a lot of these guys, they're in divorce, second, third divorce, right?
Yeah.
And to have someone by your side, you're right, because there are a lot of men who'd rather be lonely than to actually work it out in a relationship and figure out and develop as a human being. I mean, being lonely, there's some perks, but you're lonely, right? You're alone, and that's not a real good thing in my view. You don't have any reflection. You don't have anyone to talk to kind of grow.
There's no perfect match.
None.
Good luck. The longer you know people, you see them warts and all, and you got to accept it.
Yeah, you do.
Well,
listen, we're coming to the end of our show here. Is there any question I didn't ask, or anything that you'd like to chat about before we sign off?
No, I think it's been really good. As long as you're happy with everything, but it's been really enjoyable talking about it. Man, it's been 2 hours.
Has it been 2 hours? I could go a lot longer than that.
Yeah, I know. We go another hour. I mean, that's just one real operation. There's a whole lot of others, but anyway, no. It's been bloody good. Thank you.
Well, I'd love to have you back on if you'd like to come back on, chat about some other things.
Yeah. So, that'd be awesome. Yeah. We'll see. Right. I'll get through this first little media period at the moment. I'm on the New Zealand's media at the moment. I just did an interview this morning and that kind of thing, and it's about to begin. So
good. Good.
Yeah.
Well, I hope much success to you guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We Fight Monsters. And again, we're not always talking about military stuff. I mean, a lot of the monsters we're talking about is addictions, trauma, whatever it may be. But you're not alone. Get out there, kick some ass, fight some monsters. Jamie, don't sign off. We're going to chit chat after we sign off. Guys, please like, share, subscribe, check the links, buy his book on Amazon. I'll put it there. And thanks for coming on.
Cheers, man. Appreciate it.
Yep. Cheers.
Catch it.